Welcome to Healthy University, where we'll discuss issues and subjects on how you can live a healthier and more productive life. And now, here's your host for Healthy University, Alan Eisenberg.
Hi, and welcome to Healthy You. This is your host, Alan Eisenberg, and we have another episode today which is going to be really wonderful with Mathew Waymouth from Hazing Hurts. But before I bring Mathew in, it's been a tough week. There was the 8-year-old boy who committed suicide over bullying, and the video went out from the school. There's a lot of controversy around it, but we're talking about 8-year-olds who are saying I'm taking my own life because of bullying, and that's I don't know that I've heard of a younger age. 11 I thought was the last age I heard, and then unfortunately in my world, my best friend's nephew was at the babysitter's on Monday and got a hold of a gun and shot himself in the head and died. And you know, these things really affect me as someone who's classified myself as a highly sensitive person. It's really hard to get through a week like this, and I'm very honest about that. That you know, we have these good times and we have these bad times, and I was having a string of really good things, and then these sort of bad things happen, and that's life. I mean, I have to get through it. We have to get through it together. And in spirit of getting through things, I think I have a guest today that you're going to be interested in hearing from, because I think a lot like me, he experienced his own forms of abuse at a younger age and has decided to do something about it too. So my guest today is Mathew Waymouth. He's with Hazing Hurts, which is an organization that deals with the surviving of severe hazing and bullying incidents that Mathew experienced himself, and took on making this organization or working with this organization. And it takes an awful situation, as we know, and Mathew's trying to use his misfortunes to help protect the children of today and tomorrow, which is, you know, much like my mission, or all of, I think, our missions who are out here speaking publicly about the issues that children face today that we know cause things like suicide or even school violence or just pain and depression for their lives. But the good news is Mathew is happily married now with a soon-to-be 5-year-old son. Congratulations, Mathew. And whose only agenda is protecting children. So, Mathew, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about how Hazing Hurts came about, where that came from.
Sure. First, I want to say that what you said at the beginning is, I apologize that you and your friend and loved ones are going through that. It's such an awful situation.
Thank you.
And to your other point, I very similar to you in that way, where this has been a tough week due to that, you know, the 8-year-old boy. Mm-hmm. That really bothered me, as well as everything going on at Penn State and you know, everywhere else across the country, in New York and Texas and Arizona. I mean, it's all over. So I feel you on that, and it's a burden at times, but I think it also helps us get to be able to do what you and I are doing as well.
Yeah. Do you think, you know, I don't know if you've ever heard the term of a highly sensitive person or an HSP.
Sure. Yep.
Do you classify yourself there? I mean, do you find yourself easily affected by the emotions around you?
I would say that I can feel them. I think I've learned to harness them and use them for positive, and for even my professional life. You know, I'm in the real estate business, and I've been able to use that to help me judge environments or people or situations. Sometimes I joke that it's almost like a sixth sense in a way, due to a bad situation.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know that it is from a bad situation. See, I actually believe we're born this way, and that's what kind of creates I think that I was an easy target because I would emotionally react, right?
I, yep, no, I totally agree with
So
that.
that's what it was for me is like, everyone has their different targets. I mean, obviously if you're a different color or you're a different race or religion, that could be
Right,
a factor, but
right,
for those of us that are sort of, I don't know, average white guys, right? Like in a school full of that, but someone comes up and says something mean to us and we cry, that's that thing that they want. That's that want that they're
right,
getting, that reaction, that emotional reaction that we can't help. I mean, I can't help. I remember, so many people trying to tell me, why can't you just be like this? And it's like, and I thought for years, I'm like, that's what I'm going to try to do, and I couldn't.
right,
It's just not who I am. And I
right.
imagine that's, it's a very common thing when I talk to people.
Yep,
But you talk about hazing, and I was talking earlier about that I really distinguish bullying and hazing. So
yep.
what do you classify as hazing?
Well, hazing really is anytime someone is trying to join a team or a group or an organization or even a group of friends, and they're forced to do something that makes them feel uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
which they otherwise wouldn't do. And, it can be physical force, it could be verbal, um, not force, but verbal assaults
Yeah,
to
yeah,
just abuse you to the point of breaking you down and making you do something. I mean, we see that a lot in the fraternity and sorority world. I think
sure,
that's the easiest way for people to relate to that mindset.
yeah. And
But
did you experience that in that world?
well, my background was I was one of the better athletes in the school,
Mm-hmm.
and particularly in basketball. And the freshman football team is completely separate from the JV and varsity.
Right.
JV and varsity went away to camp. Freshmen stayed. They never interacted with each other. So going into my sophomore year, I wasn't going to play football and just wanted to play basketball. One, I was better at basketball, and two, I had heard lots of different stories about what happens when you go away to camp, and a lot of it was, you know, sexually charged,
Yeah, yeah,
events, and that's just, you know, I, I wasn't into that. That's not, wasn't my thing. So um, the coach actually called me into his office one day, and because coincidentally he was my freshman basketball coach as well, so I had a good rapport with the varsity football coach.
yeah.
And he asked me why I wasn't going to play football, and I told him that I wasn't going to go because um, of these different stories that I had been hearing, and I wasn't really comfortable with that, and I just wanted to focus on basketball anyway, so it wasn't really a big deal. So he tried to, convince me that nothing would happen, and stories are stories, and it's all a myth, and you'd be absolutely fine. And they want me to be a part of the team, and then he had the captains of the football team come and talk to me. One of which I knew well from because he also played basketball, and
Mm-hmm.
I played at a higher level in basketball. So, make a long story short, I play football and we go away to camp, and they, it was like 3 nights of torture. I saw other kids being abused physically, sexually, emotionally. They turn off the lights and put on, scary music from a scary movie like
Yeah.
Halloween. Or, I mean, it was a total, um, full hazing experience for everybody. And that's what some people don't understand is that they, the other kids who were there who didn't even have something, particularly happen to them like I did myself, they still were a part of that and subjected to that. And it still affects their life, whether they realize it or not.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I
if,
mean, secondhand bullying and hazing affects people, especially like I say, these sensitive people.
right.
Who are dealing with these things. And you and I were talking about sort of the difference, and it's interesting because they both, the thing that I always find with hazing, I always say the difference between bullying and hazing to me is that bullying is sort of a one there's a bully and there's a victim.
Yep.
But in hazing, it's ritualistic, it's multiple people, and it becomes sort of this. Uh, I don't know. I've always thought like it's a continuous loop of people doing things that okay, this happened to me, so I get to do it to someone else. It's almost like you hear about it in the military too, with plebes and that, and of course with new people, even in professional sports, they have to go through these hazing things, and then it becomes a ritual that they feel compelled to pass on to the next person,
Correct.
and it even damages them. Like even if they're a sensitive person, and then they've done this mean thing to someone else, that does affect some. I mean, I've heard of sports players say it's really affected me.
Sure.
And of course we know there's the terrible stories that come out of places like Penn State and many other schools where these incidences lead to death or lead to someone killing themselves.
Right.
As you say, a lot of them have sexuality, and I was in a fraternity, and luckily by the time I got in there, I don't want to say there was no hazing. Um, there was a little hazing. It was, I know that if I look back, what I would consider to be no hazing, someone else might say, well, you hazed me. But more so that there was one point where we were having our 25th anniversary and all the old guys came over. And they started telling stories of how they used to make all the new guys take their pants down and pick up olives and drop them in a martini glass and then have to drink the martini.
Yeah.
And like one of our newer guys raised his hand. He said, back when you were in the fraternity, were we gay? And I don't mean to make a joke about being gay. It's just, it was
No,
like, to us, it
that's
was like, that's like the most ridiculous thing we ever heard in our life. Like, why would we do that to someone?
right.
But to them, it was sort of this behavior that they did, and they didn't see the damage that could cause. Because that's that sexual, right? That's that. I mean, I wouldn't, I don't want to get naked in front of a bunch of people, pick up an olive with my rear end, and then be forced to drink it. I mean, that's disgusting.
Yep.
And I thought to myself, like, I was at that point, I was like, what did I join? But luckily, it was a great place for when I was there, and we didn't see that. But I do remember we didn't necessarily get along with the older guys all that well.
Yeah.
uh,
And a lot of those things too, they start there, and then they, like you said, the next guy tries to outdo the guy before him, so it's just it escalates and it escalates, and it goes from maybe something that started even innocent to now, a felony, a sexual assault.
oh yeah.
But you brought up the military a little while ago, and that's kind of where this whole thing of hazing stems from and was created in the military. And,
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah.
and I'm not a part of the military, and I respect the military greatly. It's one thing I don't agree with, but at the same token, I don't think I'm in a place to tell people how they should be ready to get ready for war, because the things that they see and have to endure are just next level.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I
It's
mean,
be something we can't comprehend, but those ideals and ideologies should not be transformed into middle school and high school kids, wanting to play a sport, and
Yeah.
their coaches and teammates taking that, I'm going to break you down to nothing and then build you back up mentality. Because I mean, again, these are kids that are just trying to innocently play a sport for fun, and we've turned it into a military-esque, man's man, machismo kind of thing. And when it doesn't, the love of the sport is almost gone in a way.
well, I even
Yeah.
remember, you're talking about having a soon-to-be 5-year-old when my oldest, who's 23 now, was 5. He was on a soccer team, and even at that age, the soccer coach, when they were losing, would tell his team to grab the person whoever had the ball, grab the back of their shirt. Like
Yeah.
just hold on to him.
Yeah.
And we were so disgusted. I mean, I think we pulled him from the team right after that, but we were just so disgusted. We're like, they're 5 years old.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
My son, in my wall goes up. I'm like, am I overreacting because of things that I've been through? But my son started t-ball a few weeks ago, and the first thing the coach said to him was, "If you pull the grass out of the ground, I'm going to pull the hair off of your head."
Whoa.
And in my mind, I said, "If you touch my kid's head, I'm going to knock you out." Like,
Well, but I mean, you're talking about 5 years old.
right?
That's a crazy thing to say to a little kid. I mean, my son
Yeah,
picked daisies in the backfield. I mean,
that's
that's what he did. I mean, that was fun, because it's t-ball. The ball ain't going out to the backfield unless something happened.
right, right.
And he picked daisies. That's what he did, and that's when we knew he wasn't going to be a sports kid. But,
Yeah,
but but yeah, you can't. I mean, and it's stories like that. People don't believe, and part of the problem that I have is that I think sometimes these coaches think these are the right things to do. These are strengthening of
yeah.
character things,
It's their reality.
and that's what bothers me is that that's even a mentality I believe in bullying and at the school.
I agree.
Um, so
That's why it has to
that's
be a
not true.
culture change and not
Right.
just a change, like changing a simple law, even though I'm trying to change laws. But still, I mean, it needs to be a complete culture change because, like you said, it's engraved in the sports world so much now that it's become a reality and people, and that's how they see life and they think that that's okay. I mean, it's just like you can compare it to the ancient times where,
Hmm.
in Roman times where they had people literally killing each other for fun. I mean,
Yeah.
now
Yeah.
look at that and we're like, what were they thinking? But at that time, they thought that was normal, just like we think things are normal now. That like this that we won't in 30, 40, or 50 years, especially 100 years from now.
Yeah, and it's not normal, and it's not the right way to bring up a society. And you mentioned the word culture. It's just interesting. I'm writing my latest paper around culture because I do believe, just like you're saying, we need a shift.
Yes,
Because what happens is these things get perpetrated over time, and people start to believe it's the right way to handle it. I don't know if you saw the movie Bully, but I bring this up all the time.
yeah,
Where imagine, these administrators at this school that they filmed at were fired after the movie came out because they thought they were handling their situations right because that was obviously passed to them.
right,
Like, hey, victim of being a bully, shake the bully's hand. Oh, you won't shake his hand? Well, you're as bad as him. Well, I call that victim blaming. And victim blaming goes like this: Hey, you got raped. What were you wearing? How many drinks did you have?
right,
What does that matter? You didn't
right,
want someone to attack you.
right.
It's none of that ever matters. And then to blame the victims,
Yep.
and then in hazing, the reporting aspect, the fear of you reporting it and the rest of the team coming down on you. I mean, I
That's why
actually talked to one person whose son was kicked off the baseball team for reporting, and the coach even said like it was all his friends, and he would go to lunch and sit at the table where they all sat, and the coach said don't let him sit at the table with you. The coach
yeah,
said that.
yep. It,
Yeah.
it's it, the situations that you hear when with adults and that leads to that part of the culture is it's a top down and it has to change with the adults because the adults are the ones that are letting this culture stir and go on. I mean, I was a high school coach for 4 years,
Mm,
after everything that I went through, and there was not one even whiff of anything like that whatsoever. But we set the tone. I mean, obviously, I knew how to set that tone,
yeah.
and I knew what to look for, and I knew the conversations to have, and I had all the tools to provide that, which not all the teachers and coaches have nowadays. But a lot of it is common sense as well,
Oh
and
yeah. Yeah.
they let these things develop. They stir. Part of it is, some teachers were, they went to high school there, so they were a part of the same, you know, traditions
Right.
and hazing and bullying that have been going on for 20 years at a school, and you see that a lot, especially in the Northeast, where I'm from in
Oh
Boston.
yeah, oh yeah. I mean, Boston's got a big reputation, as we know, you and I both. Having grown up there, that's where my bullying and took place, and your hazing took place. Um, Florida has a terrible reputation. Texas, another big
Yep,
sports state, has a
yep,
terrible reputation.
yep.
Um, you know,
Ohio.
yeah, Pennsylvania. I mean, all of these places where sports is a big player
Right.
in their world tend to have this. And we have to take a quick break, Matthew. But when we come back, I'd like to talk about maybe what kids and their parents can do about hazing when it's happening to them. So if you'll
Sure.
hold on real quick, we'll be right back with more Healthy You. Hi, and welcome back to Healthy You. This is your host, Alan Eisenberg, and I'm here with Mathew Waymouth from Hazing Hurts, and we're talking about hazing and a little bit about bullying, but really about the same issue, which is that once it happens, damage is done. Damage is done to the person, damage is done to the witnesses, damage is probably even done to some of the people doing the hazing. So, Matthew, we were talking at the break that you're trying to change some laws. What are you doing right now?
I'm trying to pass a bill in Massachusetts that is going to the House this year, and it should be this summer. That it proposes that Massachusetts, all elementary K through 12 public schools have to document, report to a third party like the police, and then also report it to the state monthly or quarterly. We haven't determined that quite yet. And last is all the schools will have to educate on the topic of hazing and bullying.
Yeah.
So we wanted to do this because we wanted to provide some common sense solutions that weren't going to cost the state or towns, really any money to to put in the schools and these programs, and it helps protect these kids because most kids don't come out or say anything because they're not sure how it's going to be handled,
Mm-hmm.
or if it's going to then turn on them and they're going to become the bad guy. Like it's exactly what happened to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Once I spoke out, I was the bad guy. I was the one who did something wrong,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and my school handled it in house, so nobody else knew about it until I had to go to the media for help because that was my only way out. And I'm trying to prevent those situations because that helps those situations cultivate an environment like that, and they let it stew and just get worse and worse, and you have over years you have hundreds and thousands of kids who have issues because of bullying and hazing. And you want to talk about all the other mental health issues that we have right now in our world, and
Oh yeah.
where do they stem from? And most of them are from childhood abuse. And these two things go hand in hand. And if we can do something that's just common sense to help change that, then that's our goal, and that's what we're trying to do.
Let me ask you something as someone who was a coach in high school. One of my big concerns with bullying at the administrative level and kind of the reporting that you're talking about is that my concern is that schools are no different than a business. So at the top of the business I work for,
Yep.
all they care about is numbers.
Correct.
Either it's dollars or things going down and things going up.
Right.
And so I, I'm I'm speculating. There's a report that just came out that said anti-bullying programs are ineffective. And what they were saying was they're ineffective because they're actually teaching the bullies how to bully. I have another theory that I may or may not pursue, which is the reason that the schools that have anti-bullying programs are showing up with higher amounts of bullying. And the reason I believe that is because people are reporting it and the schools have been encouraged by the administration above the school to report it. but
Exactly.
that there's more schools than not where a principal is held accountable for the number of bullying incidents that happen at
Yep.
the school. And instead of saying, "Hey, there's a bullying problem at the school. Let's put resources toward it,"
Yep.
the principal might get fired over it.
And you touch on a great point, because in that situation, and also in the situation of kids being bullied, whether even sometimes by teachers or administrators, or kids being hazed, is the kids get lost because in the shuffle, because the adults at the end of the day are the ones who, are their breadwinners for their family. This is their livelihood. This is their life, and they're going to protect that at all costs. And usually the cost of that is for the child.
Right.
So you're exactly right in that mindset of, that's why the numbers are skyrocketing, is because it's already there, and it's now just being exposed.
Right. And people aren't willing to take it anymore. I mean, there's no more kids being kids BS that we grew up with. That's not the world we live in. And also to me, it's public now. We can't deny what social media did was give an outlet for a youth to have a voice, whether they're making that voice in their last stand before they take their life, which is unfortunately happening a lot in bullying. But whatever. But they're saying, "Hey, this is the way I am because I was bullied." And I knew that at 13 years old. I told my parents that every day. I said, "I am acting the way I am," and I was a rebellious son of a bitch teenager. I was just talking to my mom about that today. She's like, "Oh, you're getting back from one of your other sons what you gave," and I'm like, "Yeah, but I was like this because of what happened to me," and I used it as a crutch, as an excuse for many years
Right.
until I dealt with it.
Right.
But I knew at 13 that what happened to me from 7 to 13 affected my life.
Right.
And I think that's the important thing that I think you and I both agree with, that these things are affecting the youth, and they grow up to be adults who are now affected,
Right.
depressed, anxious, scared, antisocial. All of these things we know are the results of abuse, whether that abuse is hazing or bullying, right?
Yep.
So how do we prevent it? How do we do something about it?
Well, I when I first started, I've gone on and off with this for a little while, just because, as I'm sure you know, sometimes it's not always easy to do this. It brings back things at times, especially if you haven't fully dealt with it yet.
Yep.
And previously, I had not dealt with it, at least to the point where I'm at now. And obviously, what's helped me is having my son, and that's kind of given me all the motivation I need to fulfill what I need to fulfill in this realm. But I lost my train of thought there.
Sorry. Because one of the things I was going to tell you is that happened to me. So, when I first started in 2007, when I said, okay, I'm going to write a blog and I'm going to write my stories down. I'm going to try to get them out of my head, because all they were was ruminating in my head, right? All this stuff that happened to me. And I wrote them all down, and I started this site, and I asked other people to send their stories, and they did. And then I started doing research, and I was very, very involved in it, but not quite for the right reasons yet.
Right.
So it was a very popular site because it was before sort of the media glommed onto bullying. So I was an early adopter, right, in this voice, but I hadn't dealt with it. All I had was pain. All I had were these things that happened to me,
Right.
and then it broke. Then I broke, and I admit to that.
Yep.
And I got help, and I helped myself, and I did a 180 on my life, and that's how you and I are sitting here having this conversation today. You can't sit still and think it's all going to go away,
No.
because and there are professionals out there who help you get past it, because you don't know. I mean, I always tell people there's 4 squares of learning. We all start at, you don't know what you don't know. So when things were happening to me, I thought I was the only one it was happening to. right? I'm the only one that feels this way. I'm crazy.
Right.
I'm anxious. Yeah, I'm the only one. I'll never forget. I always tell this story about when I had anxiety really bad, and it got to the point where at the barber chair, when they put the little smock over you, I was having claustrophobia. I was having a panic attack. I'm
Yep.
like, I gotta be crazy. And then I bought this book on anxiety, and like in one of the early chapters, it said, hey, some people even have anxiety attacks at the barber chair when they put the thing around their neck. And I'm like, I'm just a normal guy. I'm just a normal anxiety-ridden guy.
Yeah.
So the first of all is nobody's alone.
Right.
And that's what I always tell people.
Yep.
I'm here, you're here because we want to be here.
Correct.
We take this time out of our days, out of our lives, because we believe it's more important that we get people to not suffer like we did, right? So
Correct.
what advice do you give other hazing victims? What advice do you share?
That you can't just bury it, and the best form of therapy to come back from something like that is to fight it. And it has been for me, and the more, I mean, it happens on such a regular basis, and people don't really speak about it. And you can do power in numbers, and the more people that come out and do that will be beneficial to them, because like I said a little while ago, I've gone in waves of doing this, and because at times it's been really difficult to do when I wasn't ready to do it yet, but uh, it helped me realize some of those things along the way, and helped me get to that point. And now you have people that write you letters and thank you for helping them in a situation, or for helping change something at their school, and they were nervous about playing a sport, about doing something, and you changed something to help them. That has at least in my situation, has helped me dramatically.
Yeah, well, I think for any of us, I mean, I say it many times. If it's one person I affected by my actions that I
Right.
take,
It's worth it.
it's worth it. If I save one life, and I know I'm lucky because I know I have. I know,
Right.
just like you, people tell you,
Right.
when you've done it, and we're not doing anything more than being honest, caring, and mainly what people don't realize, empathetic people.
Right.
And empathy is not something that you're born with. Empathy is not something that everyone has sympathy, right? Something happens, oh, that's too bad, and
Right.
you want to go take care of this person. Can I bring you a meal? Can I,
Right.
do?
You don't.
That's not empathy. Empathy is understanding at a deep level
Right.
what someone is feeling, and that's why we were talking earlier about HSP.
Right.
That's why we do what we do.
Right.
People who aren't highly sensitive, I don't want to say they can't be empathetic, but it's a little more difficult unless they've actually experienced it
Correct.
themselves, because I I don't know what it is, and it's it always sounds crazy when I say it. I always feel like I'm talking about like Star Trek: The Next Generation when I talk about being an empath. But I'm not saying I can read people's minds. I can feel people's emotions.
No, I'm
And,
I'm with you. I
yeah,
can same.
and
I can.
and what I tell people is it's like, how you have a first impression of somebody, and have you ever had this happen where you
Right.
have a first impression, then you get to know them for a while, and that you're actually their friend for a while, and then about maybe a year in, you realize you were right the first time.
Right.
It's like that.
So
They
right.
win you over, and this happens a lot.
Yep.
And then, we always talk in the bullying world about your best friend becoming your worst enemy. I mean, it's part of that. It's part of that whole story
For sure.
of realizing, hey, something's wrong here, and walking away from it at that point and
It's one
doing
of the
something
things
about
that
it.
my strongest skill in my profession is networking.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you have to. You're real estate.
Right.
You build your business off of other people telling others that you were good at what you did.
Right. Yep.
And again, I think that's I've always been a talker. I've always wanted to talk things out, and I've actually been accused, you know, even though I'm heterosexual, and not that that makes a difference. I've had women say, "Are you gay?" And it's like, no, I'm emotional. I don't necessarily want to watch the football game. I'd rather talk about this emotional thing you're going through, or I'm going through.
Yep.
And they don't get that. Like we can be that. I'm that's who I am. It doesn't
Yep.
make me any less of a man
Nope.
because I get to feel this way. I think I'm more of a man because I can have honest emotions and I can deal with them versus a lot of men go to the bottle, go to the pills, go to the drugs, go to other things, go beat other people, use their fists, don't know how to handle situations.
Nope. Agreed.
So what do you recommend, when it comes to overcoming? What have you done, and what do you help others do to overcome the bullying, hazing that they deal with?
Initially you you really need to confide in somebody, whether it's a friend or a sibling or an adult. You have to confide in somebody, and nowadays with the internet and everything we have, you know, even if you don't do that, just Google things and go to your website, and
Yeah.
there's good information on there, and helpful tools that you can, that really, if you embrace it. But I can tell anybody anything, or anything that's worked for me, in little things that work. Like, for me, when I get really anxious or I have something, like taking a shower is a thing for me that just
Mm.
helps calm down. I don't know what it is about it, but it helps me.
I think it
And
helps a lot of people. I mean, I think we do.
sure,
It's relaxing,
it is, and you have to find something like that when you feel yourself getting to a certain place. But
Yeah.
I can tell anybody anything, but really, you have to want to change within yourself, and you have to want to be better and deal with it yourself. Because if you don't really want those things, it's not going to really come to fruition. And
Yeah.
you have to push through, and you have to, you got to wake up every day. You got to get out of bed, and you got to, take a shower. You got to put your clothes on. You got to do what you got to do. And if you don't, you're going to get into some bad habits and bad reputations. It's gonna take time to come back from.
Well, and I think you hit the nail on the head. The biggest thing is don't go it alone. You know,
Yeah,
there's a reason why there are people in the health field, and I hate to say the word mental health field because we think we just stigmatize mental health so bad, but you know, you
but
can develop an illness. I mean, and it is an
that's
illness,
what you
when we talk about it. Go ahead, sorry.
no, that's where you and what you do is
Right.
really important, because I mean my I come from a family that's, my dad's done very well for himself. I had everything that I ever wanted in life and more, and I that includes, going to see therapists and the whole 9 yards. And honestly, I did not have a good experience with any of them, and
Hmm.
I saw plenty. And I don't know if it's my, you know the old Irish Catholic mentality where you're not gonna tell me anything, or it's what I went through. But really, at the end of the day, that's why I say you have to really want whatever it is within yourself. I mean, even if it has nothing to do with this, and you want to be a millionaire, like, you put
Yeah.
your head down and you dig and you dig and you dig until you get there, and you don't stop for anybody or anything. And you really, it's unfortunate that you have to develop that kind of mentality to get out of this, but it's such a deeply impacting event and events and bullying and hazing, and what
Yeah.
you have to go through and deal with at such a young age. You have to grow up so fast that you have to really change and adapt and roll with it in order
Well, yeah, and I've told people many times. I mean, one of the things you're saying, I would probably tell you, that you didn't have the right therapist for what you were trying to resolve. Because just like I'm a coach, the one thing I can tell you about anyone in the mental health field is that no, there's not one of us, me inclusive as a coach, that can help you become a better you. You're
correct.
the only one that can do that. All we can do is offer guidance that we
Right.
have been either professionally trained in or through our empathetic, uh, who we are.
Right.
But I can't tell you how to get better. I can't tell you to go do all this work that you're going to have to do. That's going to be very difficult. I can't.
But I
You
think
you you have to do it. There's I can only help you either face it, get it out. If I'm a therapist, my goal is to help you
Right.
Get past your past, or stop worrying about the future that you can't control. And
Right.
as a coach, the only thing I can do is say, you're here today. Where do you want to be tomorrow? Okay, let's get a plan. And that
Right.
plan is yours. I'm not doing anything more than listening
Nope.
and
I agree.
helping you get there.
But I think that's where you and now you kind of have this little niche here, because I think you need someone to specialize in this field, because everyone
I
that I want
agree.
to talk to, and the other important part of it is that you've been through it.
Right.
Because
Right.
I'm sorry, but like when someone is sitting across from me and has, probably, is a very intelligent person, but is trying to tell me something about something that I've experienced that I know they have no idea what I'm
Yeah.
talking about. It's
Yeah.
it's hard to listen to the advice that's given back sometimes, at least for me, and that's one of
No.
the reasons why I try to put myself out there, so
Yeah.
that you know you can, and you've done an amazing job at that and
Thank
taken
you.
it to another level, which
Well,
honestly I
and
wish
I
I had
hope this is
about.
what the future is. I hope that the future is this.
Yeah,
When I put myself out there in 2007, as far as I could tell, I was the only one doing it.
yeah,
And I still think there's very few of us that are willing as adults to say, imagine telling your children, your child comes to you and they say, in your case, maybe, I'm being hazed on the sports team. In my case, I'm being bullied. And
right,
instead of saying, oh, that's too bad, I'm going to go to the school and do something about it, you say, you know what? It happened to me too.
right,
And this is what it did to me.
right,
And I don't want to see that happen to you. Has
right.
any parent ever told their kid that? Is that the words that we typically think to speak?
No,
No, it's not. And that's what I want to change is like, we're so embarrassed about feeling weak,
right,
right? Hazing and bullying, they make us feel weak inside. And
right,
that particularly in sports, it's all about being stronger. Even in the military, it's all about strength of character, strength of body, strength of mind.
yep,
And you see what happens in the military with PTSD, and now they've named what you and I are talking about CPTSD. They
right,
only put a C on it because they wanted to declassify it from what the military people have, but it's the same result.
right,
It's stress, anxiety, worry, depression, suicide, and homicide. And those are the long-term effects of these abuses. And this is what we know. And we've got to come face to face with that.
right,
When some of these kids go into these schools and shoot up a school, it was because they chose not to take their own life. They chose to take other people who they feel abused them's lives.
right,
And and that's a horrible thing. But you know, I unfortunately I can understand how a kid can get to that level.
for sure. Yeah,
And that's the sad part is that I know what that means.
yep.
So what? How can people get in touch with you? How can people find out about your work, help support your bill, um, do all that?
So we have our Facebook page, which is Hazing Hurts. Also have a Twitter account, which is the same. Our bill right now, you can sign a petition at change.org, which you can find at both my Hazing Hurts Facebook and Twitter account. The bill right now, we're trying to get as many signatures as we can from everywhere. This is something that we're gonna pass here in Mass, whether it's the first time or the second time. Hopefully, it's the first time, and then from here we're going to extend it to other states to get this passed. Hopefully, across every state, at some point here in the near future.
Yeah.
Um, at least enough where I can put enough pressure on the federal government to maybe incorporate something, because it's such common sense solutions, and these solutions truly help protect kids in school now. They help protect kids who want to speak out about it, who 70% of kids who endure these things don't feel safe about telling an adult at their
Right.
school, and that's a problem. And that's the reason why, is because they feel like they're going to handle it in house, and the victim becomes the bad guy, and that's what we need to protect. And we need to protect these kids first and foremost against anybody or anything else. And you and I are voices for those kids, and I'm going to continue to do that.
Well, I applaud you for taking it on and taking it to the legal side of the house, which I know is just a long and arduous battle. I know it is, and I certainly hope one day to be. I also believe that even if laws are passed, we have to change our communities, our cultures, like we've talked about, and I
Right.
thank you for the work you're doing, which is I consider equal to the same kind of work I'm trying to do. So I know it's an amazing. I don't think people ever realize how much time it takes from our lives, but it's
Right.
because it's so important to us. It's a passion.
Yep.
I don't ever feel like when I come home and do this that it's work. It's a passion.
Correct.
I want to save other lives. I want to see people thrive, and I mean that. And thank you for doing that, Matthew. I think what you're doing is great. I'll have all those links on the website. So I ask everybody one last question before I let them go.
Sure.
You're not going to get away without hearing it. So it's not hopefully not too difficult, but the show is Healthy You, and the goal is really that we create healthier lives, which is what we're trying to do,
Yep.
mentally and physically. So, what is the one thing you're doing today that you changed from what you used to do that makes you a healthier you?
I would say I read this book called The Four Agreements, which I'm from Boston, so obviously I'm a Patriots and a Tom Brady guy. And Tom Brady has used this book to kind of revitalize his life, and I had kind of done the same. And the biggest thing I took from that was to don't make assumptions. And since I have done that, it has greatly impacted my myself mentally
Yep.
and also in a physical way because it's gotten me to change my mindset so much that I've gone back to the gym and started being more active, physically active, and doing things that I hadn't done before. That some of which was based off of assumption, and it's so simple, but it really worked miracles for me.
Well, and it's funny because you talk about the gym and working out, and that was when I had to take my 180. Anybody in the health world will tell you you have to do two things to get better, whether it's a mental health issue or a physical health issue, and that is exercise and eat right.
Yep,
And they both affect you physiologically and psychologically.
for sure.
And certainly going to the gym, we know endorphins are released. I always say I tell people this all the time, so I know my audience has heard it before. But I love the sign at my gym, especially when I first started going there, because I wasn't an athlete. I didn't work out. I hated working out.
Yep.
Now I go for 1.5 hours, 4 to 5 times a week, and it says walking in, it says know that getting here was half the battle. And I'm like, how do they know? How do they know? My mind was like, "Don't go to the gym, Alan. You hate the gym." Blah, blah, blah. And
But
and then as I leave, it says, "Know that you'll be back tomorrow," because I feel so good when I leave. I'm like, these guys are like psychologists who made these signs at this gym. I'm like, what is this? It's crazy, right? They knew something, and I
yep,
love that. I love that. Like I see that now. I see the world so differently because of what I did with my life, and other people can too.
yep.
So thank you for being on the show, Matthew. I
Thank
think
you.
you're doing great work.
Thank you.
I will have all your links up with your podcast,
Appreciate
and I hope you get all the support that you can imagine that you need to
Thank
make things
you.
happen.
I appreciate that. And if I can be of any help to you or whatever, I hope we stay in touch. And I'm here to help you or anybody else that needs it, even if it's just an ear.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. So this
You
is
too.
Alan Eisenberg with Healthy You, and please join us for our next episode. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Healthy University, brought to you by Bullying Recovery, LLC. This podcast does not replace the need for medical advice, professional diagnosis, opinion, treatment, or services to you or any other individual. The information provided here or through linkages to other sites is not a substitute for medical or professional care, and you should not use the information in place of a visit, call, consultation, or the advice of your physician or other healthcare provider. Join us next time for more Healthy University.